Hi, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Chu Weishan, but known to most in the arts community as Weish. Yeah, it's Weishan, Weish. I don't know, people just haven't been bothered to say my whole name for most of my life, so it's a nickname thing. Um, Over about the last 12 years, my practice has evolved from being a live looping singer-songwriter to span composition, performance, and recently, in the last few years, theater making and playwriting and a whole bunch of in-betweens. I have so much to say to respond to the last two presentations, but once I open that dam, I'ma keep you captive for like 5 hours. So I will not start. But spaces, man. Okay, that's all I'll say. Um, just for a quick initiation, it's really not about my practice, but without context, it's a little bit difficult. So I have a 50-second flash through of some of the different faces I hold in the art scene. Got nowhere to be, but where you are. Blinded and you'll see, you'll never need no one but me. Right when I see your eyes, and far beyond. Yeah. It's a bit of a mixed bag. I went from in 2024 I went from writing a musical named Secondary to touring Europe with a grindcore band for whom I learned how to scream for the first time, and I proceeded to scream from Belgium to France to Italy and a bunch of other places. This band was named Worm Rot, and not many people know them in Singapore, but they are one of the founders of a genre called grindcore and are considered the world's top two grindcore bands, leading in the genre. And all over Europe there were like scores of 30,000 audiences strong, like waiting to come and watch them, and they're just a bunch of like cute bapuks, like really really sweet guys who sometimes work Grab in Singapore, and they're really really famous across Europe. So it was it was a huge eye opener about what Singapore can do quietly without anyone in Singapore knowing, and what kind of ripples we have overseas that we don't know about here. So I was initially really scared to take on this question of the Singapore sound because it seems like the biggest obsession of any interviewer, that in my short amount of time in the music scene for 12-ish years, like every interview starts with, what do you think is the Singapore sound? And I guess I'm very tired, but also I also don't know if I have any good answers anymore, even or or if there are any good answers at all. So I was worried that I have nothing new to contribute to this conversation, frustrated at the question in general, especially from a time when, we're young, we're musicians, we just want to make noise and run around lah, and connect with people and mosh and express youth and, bump up against each other and feel energy. Like that's all we wanted as youth. It really wasn't on our minds as much as it is today. I think maybe 10 to 11 years ago when I started out, we never thought about who am I, what is my identity, what is my brand. I guess starting out in more underground spaces maybe, or like in more indie spaces or slightly more experimental music spaces, it was just raw, just do. No need to think, just do, go je, um so that was where I came from, but now in the last few years, it's taken an interesting turn for me personally. Like, while I don't start any project, and I don't think any of us start any project wanting to represent Singapore or be the voice of Singapore, I have noticed that in recent years, I have some weird greater yearning to find an identity for myself through the process of making. Not in terms of how I want to package myself necessarily, but just really, really learn who I am via the work that I make. So to this end, I'm just going to share a bit about two works and the relevant reflections from each of these works. The first of which is Secondary. I'll show you our trailer for the restaging, which is happening right now at Victoria Theatre, and this is the Secondary trailer.
Binomial, polynomial, area of circle R square. Circumference of circle 2 pi R, theta times theta, theta square. B cos y, B cos max, B cos y, mathematics. I write my own life, carve my own spaces. I build me a chair to sit at the table. What is the voice but to make your own meaning? On paper, we carve our life into times up and down.
Sorry to blow your speaker. So that's Secondary, which we opened last Thursday, so it's very fresh. And I'm also switching brains from that, so forgive me if anything feels very scattered. The thing about Secondary that's made me consider Singapore sound is that many who have come out of the theatre have instantly said in the foyer, like, hey, this music sounds fresh and contemporary and different, yet deeply Singaporean and familiar. And I've been trying to unpack these overwhelming comments, like, why does everyone keep saying that? And are these two things at odds with each other? On one hand, contemporary is a word I struggle with a lot. It's something I get described with relentlessly in things, but I'm not sure what it means now to sound modern or contemporary, not dated. Is it to be aware of shifts in aesthetic or sonic trends around the world? Is it to follow these trends? Or is it to sound fresh and interesting in spite of these trends? But then isn't cultural identity rooted in history and tradition? So how can I be both? And then on the other end of the spectrum, Singaporean and familiar in terms of responding to the music of the play. I don't understand this because uh, I the on the most obvious level they might be responding to the local vernacular in the lyrics. I have a bit of ah yeah here and there, and maybe little pepperings of Singlish in the songs. But beyond that, I can't see what elements of the music sound Singaporean. Being trained in Western classical, both musically and literarily, and influenced by music and text from all over the world, as you both have mentioned. Maybe it was the framing that the whole thing is such a Singaporean story that it colors how you receive the music or the sound. And maybe that's just it. It's not so much about how we sound, but what we're saying and what stories we're telling. But the conversation has made me think about the how we sound. Um, every night when in our show, audiences chuckle at the opening song. It goes, Aya, Aya. And the minute she breaks into song with Aya, people laugh. Um, and I get that, oh, okay, the instinctive thing to do when you use English in a song is to laugh. But by the end of the play, when we bring Aya back after a whole bunch of things have happened, and as a very heavy lament, audiences really receive its emotional weight and anguish. And somebody remarked that Singlish becomes no longer a gag, but a serious and legitimate ingredient of lyricism, a viable thing to use as poetry. And I think about that a lot. The cultural capital of sounding Singaporean. In music, because we've grown up on Western music, a lot of us have, we are all primed to sing in Western accents. And if we sound Singaporean, it might get a laugh or we might not be taken as seriously. Although, side note, I've always wondered at the fact that indigenous cultures or non-Chinese cultures in Singapore, such as Malay rap, or such as like the Tanglish that Young Raja uses, has no trouble being perceived as cool. Like growing up, Malay and rap or Malay accented rap has always been unquestioningly cool to all me and my friends, to other people from other schools. But something about Chinese Singaporeans being allergic to their brand of the Singlish sound in art and music has often been perceived as cringe and blah blah blah. There's a much larger point about colonial history and our relationship to all that, which I won't get into. But in my own small way and my own subjective experience, I find myself wanting to change that. And so, as MD this time, I found myself directing the actors to sing, even in the quiet songs, the sad songs, in more local accents, even in the, much heavier songs. And it's been difficult, a delicate balance of A, wanting to be part of the change and elevate the sound of Singaporeanness, and also wanting the audience to see themselves and feel the sincerity of the characters. But at the same time, B, fearing that sounding too Singaporean in a song that's meant to be felt deeply would feel so unfamiliar that the actor is not taken seriously. So that's a strange balance that we've been trying to toe in the process of secondary. Yeah. Then the other work that I wanted to share today, which is a lot more directly related to my own exploration of identity in a more explicit way, is a show called Stray Gods, which I presented at SIFA last year. Yes, and here's a tiny excerpt of it before I talk a little about it. Words begin to unravel. There's no end down there. What's there? What's within is sucking me in down the black hole. Can't help myself. What? Can't look in. Words begin to unravel. There's no end down there. What's there? What's within is sucking me in down the black hole. Can't help myself. What? Can't look in. Words begin to unravel. There's no end down there. What's there? What's within is sucking me in down the black hole. Can't help myself. What? Can't look in. Words begin to unravel. There's no end down there. What's there? What's within is sucking me in down the black Thank you. Ayo, no need clap. Sorry, I have two very small hands navigating the universe. Okay. Um, that was something called Stray Gods. The language you hear me singing in is Hakka. I am Hakka, but a very bad one. And like many Chinese diaspora in Singapore, I have been estranged from my roots and my culture. And recently I had chanced upon Hakka mountain songs, forgotten Hakka mountain songs, collected by one rare researcher that went around various rural areas collecting songs of thousands of years of oral tradition by my Hakka ancestors who were nomads roaming through the mountains, who were historically homeless and rootless, and all the songs that had been forgotten because there was no written history. And when I chanced upon them, I felt so eerily connected. Like, I'm not usually very woo-woo about these things, but like, I was chopping onions and I was listening and I found myself singing along, and there were these strange melodic jumps that I instinctively jumped along with the melody, and I kept rewinding to see, like, did this happen before? How did I know how to sing that? And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's some magic to it. Maybe there's something about, cellular memory or something. But it sparked this huge obsession, and I did a lot of digging to find these songs. Concurrently, I was being asked to make a Sifa show, and the brief was do anything you want. So I was very overwhelmed. And at the same time, I was rereading Euripides' Bacchae, an ancient Greek play that I weirdly connected with a lot as a 16-year-old and have read all the translations of through my life because I love them. The best one is by Anne Carson. And something about these like ancient Greek women who were sort of estranged and thrown out into dancing through the mountains, and something about the Hakka songs that were meant to traverse mountains, something about that shared female experience of mania, of rejection, of identity, blah 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 blah. Sorry, I didn't mean to go so deep into this, but brought those two things together for this project. And so I ended up doing a reimagining of the Queen Agave from the Bacchae, uh, in my own voice as weish, lamenting things that I felt connected to, like a sense of being cast out, or grieving, or yearning, or deep loss. And those are all things my songs are about anyway, because I'm an emo girl. And it kind of all coalesced in that way. And because the Hakkaness was in sort of floating in my brain, I responded to the Hakka songs by weaving some of them in, but also engaging with the lyrics and responding to and using the images that my ancestors used. These are the lyrics of one of the very first Hakka songs I learned. It's very beautiful, and it's the one that sprung the whole project. Um, but this is where I come to the anxieties of presenting the work. Like, besides thunder tea rice, I have zero connection to my culture. Like, zero. I don't speak it. My parents have forgotten how to speak Hakka because long story about cultural revolution and how it was one of the least encouraged dialects to speak out in the wild. And so my great grandfather chose not to teach it to my grandfather, who chose not to teach it to my parents. Um, and it, it it worries me that more real Hakkas who come to my show and experience my work feel like I might be bastardizing tradition or am showing a very reductive representation of Hakkaness. And do I have a right to sing in Hakka or reference Hakka songs when I have no real lived experience as a Hakka? And I think this is all very textbook diaspora existential crises of identity, but very felt nonetheless, despite knowing I'm very much a cliche. Um, And to recycle the point and to resonate with what you both have already said, while I am Hakka, I am also a child of modernization and multiculturalism and colonization. I grew up on Bach and Radiohead and MTV. Some of my greatest loves are Samuel Beckett and Greek tragedy. And if I were to ever fully decolonize myself, I wouldn't know how much of me is left. So I can only sing with a voice I've been given, and the voice can only be made up of the voices that fed it, whether you call it dilution or bastardization or addition or evolve or evolution. Um, wow, that was a loud sniff. Um, I think there is one clear answer, as Shazza spoke about very eloquently earlier, that hybridity or dilution is our very identity, and we lean in and we claim it. And in embracing the mess and all the disparate ingredients in our soup, if they make up the songs that we sing in ways that encapsulate what we are, we might just create new traditions that future generations inherit and try to reconnect with and yearn for. The question underneath all of it, which is what I'll end with, that plagues me every day is, what are we shouting into the universe as human beings who live in this specific time? At the end of the day, maybe I'm less interested in how our voices sound, but what our voices are saying. And whether I'm using modern pop production or traditional instruments or Hakka folk lyrics or a sonnet or a haiku to clothe my story, maybe I need to be more interested in what that story is. Um, Human stories haven't changed fundamentally. Longing, love, loss, existential crises. These are stories human beings have been telling from the beginning of time. But what are the specific joys and sorrows of human experience right now from our vantage point in this lifetime, from this island? How have our stories changed, and how will our stories remain the same? Maybe the Singapore sound is just the specific flavor of repression that we feel here. Maybe it's the destabilizing flux of living in a country where permanent transients whose homes and roads and shores are perpetually changing, which is all of what Singlit is about. Um, or a lot of what Singlit is about, not all. The voice of Singapore, of Singaporeans and our deep yearning for an identity. But knowing our identity will always be incomplete, undefinable, and in construction. And with that, I thank you very much for listening to me today.